Welcome CSC 235, Advanced Web Applications, and we're going to dive into loops a little bit, and then we're going to dive into the JavaScript DOM. Well, it's not really the JavaScript DOM, but we're going to navigate the HTML DOM with JavaScript, so we'll be doing that. So we're going to do a couple short little exercises just to make everything kind of make sense. So if you're really good with this and JavaScript and everything, this might be a little basic, but even myself, I like to understand how this stuff works, even starting at the very basic aspect of it, and also to see how it compares with Python and things like that. So let's get started. I'm going to make a new repel. And if you hear chomping in the background, that's my dog chewing on a bone. At least she's not barking or anything, so I'll take chewing on a bone. So if you hear that, that's what it is. So we're going to make an HTML CSS template, and we'll just call it 235. You don't have to put CSC, and I'll put ex4, and I'll just put loop intro, because this will be intro stuff we'll do here. We'll just keep kind of building up. And if you want to put your initials, I'll put CJH, because I've been doing that in this particular Replit account. All right, starting from scratch here, we have basic HTML. We can leave this in here. Let's get rid of hello world. Let's get rid of this stuff, the built with Replit, and even the whole script that's in here. The only thing we'll leave in here is a link to our script, which is this. We're going to put some stuff in here. Now, I don't have any HTML in here. If I run it, I could just run it from here. I don't have to open it in a new window right now. There's nothing going on here. Here's our script. And it says not sure what to do. And let's do something. Let's make a loop. And let's look at JavaScript loops. And this is under JavaScript W3 Schools. And there's a lot of places you could go to learn about loops. We've done loops in Python. If you had the Python courses, they're the like for in. We've done that to repeat things. Now remember, a lot of times we're writing out to your console, and that's what we're going to do here to start, but it's going to be a little bit different when we write to an HTML page. Now, I think this is confusing because they say instead of writing text plus or equals cars1, cars2, and they give an example here, and they print out these cars, and I even had to look some stuff up because I want to know how this is working, because they create a variable called text, and it's empty, and then they just add this empty text to each iteration of the loop, and then it prints it out this many times, and it prints it out differently. And then this thing's even outside the loop. So I find this confusing, but what you really have to know about the loop right now, I'll explain it to you a little bit better, hopefully, is that, let's say you have a list here. And we don't have to start out with a list. We'll work towards a list. But basically, they have kind of conditions here in parentheses. And the first one sets an iterator to 0. So that's a starting point. And then there's kind of a condition of while that iterator is less than the cars.length, which would be the length would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many are in that list is the length. It's not the index numbers, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The length is how many are in there. So you could have just put, this will work out the same way if you put 6 in there, because if there's 6 in there, it's the same thing. But if you don't want to count them, then way you put length. And then this is an iterator, which will just keep adding it each time. So it should do this, start here, while this is at this point, do it and just keep adding to it. So it'll keep writing out this code. And what they do here is they add to this blank text, and they print it out with a line break, and it does this. Now, I'm going to explain why that does that, because it kind of confused me, and it doesn't take a lot to confuse me, but I want to make sure you're not confused. So anyway, this is the way it kind of works here. We have for, we have parentheses where we put those 3 kind of statements that are in there, those 3 expressions, and then we put curly braces, and then we put statements inside of there that are meant to iterate, that are meant to repeat. So that's what we're going to do. And let's go back. And before we do anything, we won't even put anything on the page yet, because that gets a little confusing. You can see what I mean. You're making a variable of text. There's nothing in it. It seems more complicated than it needs to be. So let's just start simple. Let's just write to our console. And let's just write a for loop. For, and then inside here, we'll put I equals 0, because they always use I for an iterator. So we'll start at 0. And then we'll put a semicolon. And then we'll put a space. You don't have to have a space. And we'll do I, and let's say less than 10. Just start with a number. And then a semicolon. And then for the last one, I'll just put I++. And then you need the opening and closing curly braces. And then whatever happens in here is going to repeat. Well, let's just put console log, because that's the easiest way to do it. Now, we don't have it open yet, but we'll do console.log. And in parentheses, we'll just put I. And it should just make a number. Let's see. We'll put a semicolon here. Sometimes you can get away without a semicolon, but let's do it. Now, where is it? Well, we're doing console log. We have to open this up. So there it is. And there it is. It wrote 0 through 9 because it's starting at 0. As long as it's less than 10, it's doing it. If you wanted to go 1 through 10, you could start at 1. And then you can make this less than or equals to 10, so it does the last one, and then run it. And then there it's doing 1 through 10. Okay, so that's a basic loop. So that's just generating numbers using I. We're not using any variables other than what's created in here. So you might have done something like that in Python, and we kind of counted things and so on. So that's kind of, it doesn't help us right now outputting numbers. We actually would like to print things to a page, or maybe we want to put a whole bunch of elements in a drop-down select menu for a form, something like that. That's what we want to build to. But let's try something else. Let's just keep working with this. And again, if you ever want to keep working on things and keep the code you have, you can kind of copy it and paste it and then just comment this out. Just highlight this and just do command / or command question mark. Now it's doing it with these slashes for each line. When it does it like that way, you can always do this. Here's another thing. If you have a problem doing that, just do /**, and at the bottom do */ just like CSS comments. It kind of brackets them in, so the asterisk is always on the inside. So that way, if you want to remember what you did and you don't want to lose what you did, because we're going to change this, it's still here. So you have your old code here. That's another reason for commenting, I guess. So what we'll do is let's make a list. We'll go up here and I'll make a list here, and we'll do fruits. Sometimes they do fruits, so I'll do const. We're not going to change fruits, the list itself, so we'll do const. We'll say const fruits, or fruit is fine, equals, and then we'll make an array. And I'll put, in alphabetical order, I'll put apple, orange, pear, and watermelon. I'll do 4 of them. Now, these are variables right now because they don't have quotes. Now, one way you could put quotes on here is just double click on it and do shift quote. It'll put a quote around it. And if you want to do multiple ones, you could double click and go over here, hold option. Now, on a Mac, I hold option. I'm not sure what it's like on Windows. You could try holding alt, see if that works. You could try holding control, see if that works. Just try different things. Or you could just do it one at a time. But if I hold option, it makes multiple selections highlighted. And that way I could do shift quote, and it puts quotes around all of those. Now let me move this over just a little bit. And so now we have a fruit list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to print out these fruits to the console, and then we'll try to print them out to the page. So if I just run this right now, let's just see what happens in the console. We're going to get some, what's happening here? Oh, it's just printing out the same thing. It's not doing anything with that. But what if I do fruit and then put I in there? Remember the index of I. Let's try that. And it's running into a problem. It's starting with orange. It's doing pear, watermelon, then going undefined. And do you know why that's happening? Because we're starting at 1 and we have less than or equal to 10 and so on. So what we really want to do, if we are going to work with fruit, we should say I equals 0, start at the first index, and then this shouldn't be less than 10, it should actually be less than 4, but what you could do is just put less than fruit length. So that's the length of the array. Fruit.length is the length of the array fruit, and it should be the same as 4. And then we're iterating here, and what it should do is print to the console 4 times, and it should print each fruit because it's going to change each time. The first time it goes through, it's going to be apple. Second time, it's going to be orange. Next time it's going to be pear, next time it's going to be watermelon, and it should do that. So there it is, apple, orange, pear, watermelon. That's printing out to the console of these. Well, let's try something different. Now, we don't want to just print to the console. That's just like working in Python and stuff like that, but we want to print to our page. Our page is empty here. Typically, we want to put something on a page. We typically have to, make a place for it. So let's just make a place for it for now. Let's go in index, and we don't have anything here, and I'll just put div, and I'll put # fruits, and hit tab, and that'll write a div with the ID name fruit. So if we have to identify that div with fruits, we have it. Now remember, that's the ID name fruits, not the array or anything like that. We just have to keep track of some of these things we're working with. So hopefully we're going to print something here. So what we might want to do here is say, okay, we have fruit. Let's just retype it here and put document dot get element by ID, and then the element we want is fruits, and it should be in quotes. And we'll put dot inner HTML, click on it, remember it's capital HTML, equals, and then we'll just print out fruit, and then we'll use the index square brackets there, and we'll put I in there, and we'll put a semicolon at the end. Okay, I'll move this over just a little bit. Okay, so we have our array of fruit, 4 fruits. We have this set up, and that was working. And now this time, instead of printing down here, we're actually saying get element by ID fruits, and we're printing inner HTML of that particular variable to the page. Now let's see what happens. It prints out watermelon. So it basically went through here, and it went through apple, and it wrote down apple. You didn't see it. And it wrote down orange, and you didn't see it. And it wrote down pear, and you didn't see it. And by the time it's done, the last thing it did was watermelon. So that's the last thing it got to. So basically, it just wrote what the last version of this is at the end of the loop, if that makes sense. I had trouble figuring that out, why they had to put let and a blank, because what they do in their example is they actually concatenate all this stuff together, and they build it up. Notice there's a plus equals there, and that's kind of a key to do that. But we don't have to make a variable of nothing. We can just concatenate basically our output together, if that makes sense. But that's kind of what they do there. If you look at here and inspect it and see what's going on in there in demo, you can see what it wrote to the page is BMW brake, Volvo brake, Saab brake, and so on. It just wrote that to the page inside of demo, and it put that in there. But it had to take text and add nothing to it and add a line break to itself. So again, let's just get back here and see what we're doing here. You might say, well, why don't we just put a line break? Well, I'll put BR, and I'll do it like HTML. I'll just put it in quotes, and then I'll just put a BR tag. Let's just write a BR tag. Now, all that's going to do is do the same thing, except put a break after it. If you right-click on this and inspect, and then just go find where it is, there's the HTML, there's body, there's fruits, and you can see what it did. It put watermelon in quotes and then just did a BR after it. That's all it did. So that did not help. So what we actually have to do is kind of add it to itself so that it can keep printing out. It is printing it out. Now, let me just point this out. It is printing it out 4 times, but it's just kind of rewriting, and it's happening so fast you only see the last time. And what we have to do is kind of add it to itself. Have it do the first one, and then add it to the second one, add it to the third one, add it to the fourth one. Now, how you do that? Well, you add it to itself. So let's go here. Let's get rid of this. And we will use a break, but let's get rid of this. Well, let me leave that there for now. I guess I could leave that there for now. But what we have to do is let's shorten this whole big thing here. Document element by ID fruit. That whole thing here, let's just make a variable that represents that. So we'll copy it, and I'll just call it output. I'll say let output, and it's document.get element by ID fruits, and that'll just represent this. So the variable represents this. So that means you don't need this because let represents that. So this could just be let dot inner HTML equal fruit plus that. Well, by doing this, we didn't change anything. Actually, I'm glad I hit that because I wrote it wrong. Let isn't the variable name. Output is a variable name. So let's try this again. Okay, no error, but it did the same thing. It just wrote out watermelon because it's still doing the same thing. It's not really writing it again. What we need to actually do is add it to itself. So we would have to do output.innerHTML equals output.innerHTML plus fruit. So it's taking the output and then adding the output to it again. So hopefully it should keep building onto it. And let's see what this does. So now we're saying, okay, output inner HTML. All right, let's just try it out. Okay, that actually works because it's adding to itself. Now, this is a little confusing looking at that. What you could do is use a shortcut, which is basically using plus equals. If you do plus equals, it's saying take yourself, whatever this is, whatever output.innerHTML is initially, which is basically get element by ID, and it's adding it to itself. So it's kind of adding nothing to it first, and then it's printing out apple. and then it's going back and it's adding apple to orange, then it's adding apple and orange to pear, then it's adding apple and orange to pear to watermelon. So it's actually showing the original one plus the next one, and it's building up that way. So when you run it out, it actually works, and it's putting a line break in between there. Now, we don't have any paragraphs or anything like that. So if you add anything to the list, let's see, what's another fruit? Let's put grapes in here. I'll put grapes, because I'll keep in alphabetical order. Grapes, comma, make sure you put this in quotes, and run it. And now it's doing all those. So you can keep adding these, and as long as you have fruit dot length, it doesn't matter what the number is because it'll keep updating that number. So that's one thing to think about there, just outputting this. And we're also going to have to think about things when we start working with the DOM. So after this, and we'll stop this video in a few minutes, but once we get off of this, we're going to start talking about the DOM a little bit more. Now, if you go down to JavaScript DOM, and there's the JavaScript DOM, it's worth looking through this. The document object model, you should know what DOM is. And you can go through some of this stuff here, objects, properties, methods. You're familiar with those. They talk about getting elements by ID. There's different ways you can get them, but element by ID is the most common with JavaScript. Inner HTML property is very common. Here's the DOM document object model. Now, this is the good stuff. DOM document, JS HTML DOM. Changing HTML elements changes the inner HTML of an element. So we already used inner HTML, but you can also change an attribute. You could change style and property like the CSS, and you could also set an attribute. And even these things are even more important. You can create an element, remove a child, append a child, replace a child. So these are important too. So when we start writing paragraphs and we want to put paragraphs in there instead of just line breaks, we're going to have to create an element. And if we wanted to make a ordered list or a bulleted list or something, and we wanted to make elements, we'd have to use these things. We'd have to create elements and put them in that loop. So that's what we're going to do next. So in ex4b, we're just going to make a little loop of, you could do fruit. Maybe I'll do days of the week or something like that since we did that earlier. But that's the end of ex4. So if you did this, that's all you have to do for ex4. And we'll move on to ex4b, where we'll kind of do a different one here, because I don't want to have too much code in one repel. I'd like to keep these short and simple. So the next one will be 4b, and we'll actually work with days of the week and try to put them in paragraphs first, and then we can work on building them up and putting them in a bulleted list.